All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I'm from SEB Housing, and I'll be running tonight's lottery for the 65 affordable rental units at the Devon at Weiss Farm in Stoneham. And I'll get the lottery underway in just a few minutes. If you have any questions during this session, you can either type them into the Zoom function, or the chat function, I should say, in Zoom, or you can unmute yourself. You were muted when you came into this meeting, just to minimize any outside noise. So this session is being recorded. It's going to be posted to SEB Housing's YouTube channel later on tonight for anyone who wasn't able to join us and wants to view that. Before I do the drawing, I'm going to give you some background information on who applied, and so you have kind of some more information on that. All of this is also going to be sent to you by email with the waiting lists that are generated after tonight's lottery. So all households should already have their lottery application number. In this case, it's in the form of a series of numbers. That's the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery. We're not going to be drawing, first and last names or anything like that. It's going to be your lottery number. So in this case, it's between A.001 and A.0229. I see that I already have a message here asking what someone's number is. So if you could type you can switch the chat here so that you're just messaging me, and you can send me your first and last name and I can take a look. Everyone should have received a email with your lottery application number if you were approved for this lottery. So if you were still, trying to get paperwork in or anything like that, you wouldn't have been approved before the deadline. But if you did get everything in, then you should have that. So let me just real quick look up this participant or this attendee's number, and just give me 1 second. I want to make sure everyone has the number, because otherwise you're not going to know where you were drawn tonight. So just 1 second, let me look that up. Yep, I got that for you. So your number, I'm sending it back to you now, is okay. All right, so like I said, everyone should have their lottery application number. I'm going to give you some background information real quick before I do the actual drawing. I'll be screen sharing when I'm doing the drawing. There are 65 application numbers, 65 affordable units, I should say, 221 total applications for this lottery. And so there's going to be 221 households in this lottery, and the numbers go up to 229 because we had to remove some duplicates and applicants who withdrew their application after they submitted it. So the numbers go up to 229, but there's only 221 applicants. There are 7 studios. We had 30 applicants for those 7 studio apartments. There are 24 one-bedroom apartments, and there were 47 applicants for those one bedrooms. There's 26 two-bedroom apartments with 73 applications. 3 of those 2 bedrooms are disabled accessible, and there were 3 applicants who indicated that they need the features of those 3 disabled accessible units. So those 3 households will have priority on that 2-bedroom disabled accessible waiting list. There's also 8 3-bedroom apartments, and there's 122 applicants for those 3 bedrooms. One of those 3 bedrooms is a hearing impairment accessible unit. So there's 1 person who indicated they had a need for that. So they will have priority on that hearing accessible 3-bedroom waiting list. So back when you completed your application, you indicated your household composition. So how many people are in your household, and we confirmed whether or not your household type was 1, 2, or 3. So you want to keep in mind that when I'm sorting the results of the lottery to create the waiting list, usually the larger households are going to have priority for the larger units. So if you applied for a 2-bedroom unit, if you're a type 2 or 3 household, you're going to have priority over type 1 household. Same with the 3 bedrooms. Those of you who are type 3 households are going to have top priority on that waiting list. There's also local preference or priority for some of the waiting lists. So if you answered yes to the local preference question on the lottery application, you will have a priority for some of those units, and you'll have to confirm your residence in the town and all of that after the lottery if you're one of the top households. So after the drawing takes place tonight, you're not going to know for certain where you are in the waiting list, even if you're drawn first. And that's because we have to sort the results by all of the preferences that I just mentioned. So household type, whether or not your household requires a accessible unit, and local preference. So like I said, when I do the drawing tonight, I will let you see obviously where your number was drawn in the lottery, but that's not where you are going to be on the waiting list. You'll have to wait a little bit longer. Later on tonight, that will be sent to you, so you'll be able to see where you are on the waiting list. So there's going to be 2 drawings tonight. I'm going to be using the website random.org to complete the drawing. So first, there'll be the local preference drawing. I'll include the households, the 41 households who indicated that they have local preference. I'll do a randomization of those numbers, and then I will move on to the general drawing, which will have all 221 lottery households put into the list randomizer that I'm going to show you. I'm going to be screen sharing with you, so you'll be able to see it if you have your computer or your phone open. If you don't, and you're just calling in, you won't be able to see the actual drawing, but I'll be able to tell you where your number fell. So question here was, when will we be able to know? So I'll be sorting the results after the lottery, so you should get an email from me late tonight, if not tomorrow, very early tomorrow morning. And the waiting list will be attached to that email, along with some of the information I just gave you in terms of how many people applied and all of that. And then another question. Sure, yep.
Do you know what the total number of units are in that development?
I might. I should.
So no, it's kind of a 2-part question. What is the total number of units, and do you know how many buildings there are? Because this seems like there's a lot of buildings in that development.
So there's going to be 259 units, not all affordable. There's only going to be 60 to 65 affordable, but 259 buildings. There's also going to be there's townhomes associated with it. So I think there's 2 or 3 large buildings in the middle, and then there's some townhomes around the edges. I'm not going to pull up the site plan right now, but I know it's kind of like a campus setting where there's, larger buildings in the middle with the townhomes kind of around the edges.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I had one other question too. You said there was 3 2-bedroom handicap units in the lottery, and there was 3 people that applied for it. So if you're one of those 3 people, necessarily you don't even have to watch the lottery. You know that you're going to get picked for one of those units, correct?
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of doing the rest of these steps. So the the lease screening and all of that. Yep. Yep. Yeah. You'll be one of the top 3 on that list. Yep.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. And then the other question here in the chat was, if I don't make the top of the list, how does first come, first serve work? Does everyone make the waiting list? Yep. So everyone who applied for this lottery and was approved for the lottery is going to have a position on the waiting list. The lottery and the preferences that I need to sort them, that's kind of determines where your position on the waiting list is going to be. So everyone will be on the lottery if you were approved, on the waiting list if you were approved for this lottery, and then anyone from the public who is applying to get onto these waiting lists after the lottery will be after anyone who is in the lottery. So you're watching this call right now. That means that you were approved for the lottery. You're going to have a position on the waiting list. If, if you're looking for a studio unit and there's only 7 studios and you're the 10th person on the waiting list, if a few people ahead of you on the waiting list don't end up renting those units, you could be someone who is called upon to move forward and potentially rent the unit. So even if you're further down the waiting list, it doesn't mean that you won't be able to rent one of the units. It just kind of depends on what happens ahead of you. People who have more favorable positions on the waiting list may drop off. So there's a question here. I applied for the units. Is it possible to switch to the townhomes? So if you applied for a 3-bedroom apartment, you're going to be on the waiting list for the townhomes as well. There's a few, I believe it's, there are 2 townhomes included in this. There's 8 total 3-bedrooms. 2 of those are townhomes. So anyone who applied for a 3-bedroom is going to be on the waiting list for 3 bedrooms. It's just a matter of if, the top 2 people that are approved on the 3-bedroom waiting list, if they choose a townhome, they may already be rented by the time we get to your position on the waiting list. But if you didn't apply for a 3-bedroom, you can't change it now, unfortunately. You would be at the bottom of the 3-bedroom list if you were to switch that. And then there's a couple other questions coming in. So does it matter if lower or higher application number for the drawing? No, so your actual number that you have doesn't matter at all because they're all going to be randomized when we do the drawing. So if your number is A.001, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a favorable position. It just means that you got your application in early and we approved your application early. Because that's how numbers were assigned. So if your number is 220, you have the same chance right now of having a favorable position on the waiting list versus someone who has a lower number. But once the drawing is done, obviously, you're going to see kind of where you fall. So just to give you an idea of what the drawing is going to look like, I'm going to screen share right now so you can see this website, random.org, that I'm going to be using. So just give me 1 second and I will pull that up. And I'm going to share my screen. This isn't the drawing yet. This is just to give you kind of a rundown of what it's going to look like. So random.org. Wants to verify I'm human. List randomizer. And then this is just, like I said, for demonstration purposes, I typed in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to click randomize. When I do this actual drawing, I'm going to copy and paste the lottery application numbers into this box where the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is right now. And when I click randomize, it's going to spit out those numbers again, just in a random order, and that is the lottery drawing. And then I'll do a couple things to make it easier for you to read. But so just for demonstration purposes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see here, I'm going to click randomize, and then it repopulates the numbers just in a random order. So if this were the drawing, number 4 would be first, number 5 would be last, for example. I'm going to screen share again in just a minute so you can see the actual drawing in that way. But just to give you an idea of like what it looks like, I wanted to show you that. All right, just a few other things as well that I wanted to get to before the drawings. So like I said, the drawings tonight, the local preference drawing and the general drawing, the results from tonight allow me to have an order of priority for when I'm generating the waiting list or when I'm sorting the results onto the waiting list. The waiting lists are what determine the order in which households will get to reserve units. So it's important to remember that, again, the drawing results from tonight are not the final order of the waiting list because I have to do those sorts tonight based off of household type, local preference, and whether or not you need a disabled accessible apartment. So after the lottery, that email will come to you with the waiting list attached. It'll have information on next steps, and you'll get that by tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. Keep in mind too that if you indicated interest in more than one unit size, so if you applied for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, you're going to be on more than one waiting list. So just keep that in mind. When you get that email, you're going to see that the top households on the waiting list will be highlighted in green. The numbers will just be shaded in green. And that's just indicating for you that those households are going to be invited to immediately move forward to the next step in the process, which is to complete a lease application with the leasing office over at the Devon. Your contact information will be shared with the leasing office. You'll also have the contact information as of tonight, and you'll be able to submit all of the information they might need for your lease screening. So keep in mind too that the leasing office will likely invite more households forward than there are available units. That's because there's applicants that are going to be dropping off because they either aren't eligible or they withdraw, they no longer are interested in renting at the Devon. So if, for example, there's 7 studios, they might call 10 or 15 people forward off the waiting list to do their screening. If you're found to be lease eligible, the household with the highest position on each waiting list will have the first chance to select one of the apartments and reserve it. If you're not one of the top households on the waiting list, you won't be moving forward in the process at this time. But like I mentioned, if for one reason or another the top households don't ultimately end up renting, which happens all the time, we'd have to proceed, or the leasing office will have to proceed further down the waiting list in order to screen other households for leases. So it's important to keep in mind too, SEB Housing, we've only completed your initial screening based off of what you self-reported on your lottery application. So you haven't submitted all of your income, asset tax documentation to us. That would happen after your lease eligibility review with the leasing office, and you would come back to us and then complete your program screening with SEB Housing. So there's still a few steps to go before you'd be able to sign a lease. So just keep all that in mind. You have about 10 days to get your information into us, the income, asset, and tax documentation to SEB Housing after you reserve an apartment if you pass that lease screening. And we'll work with you. If you don't have everything in right away, we'll let you know what's missing and all of that. So we'll be in touch with you further along in the process. I've been told that the first units at the Devon are scheduled to be available for occupancy around mid-July. But the leasing office is planning to pre-lease the units soon after the lottery, so there shouldn't be a wait between tonight and getting the lease screenings going. You just may be signing a lease for a date in the summer. And then finally, before I do the drawing, just one extra thing I want to mention. We always like to remind households, anyone who's living in a affordable apartment, you're going to have a recertification every year. And that's with the leasing office. So just kind of make sure that you have all of your tax documentation, income information available to you so you can get it to them. If you were to sign a lease in, say July of this year, you'd probably be looking to do your recertification with the leasing office around this time, around April of next year, just to confirm your finances for the following year. So I think I had a couple other questions come in as I was talking. I got a pre-approval application. Does that mean I already got selected? You shouldn't have received anything for this lottery from SEB Housing. I don't know what the pre-approval application would have been, if you got that from the leasing office or what it was, but no, nobody's been selected yet for this because this is the first step in the process with lottery households, the lottery, which is happening tonight. So any other questions before I do the drawing? And then I'm going to screen share the drawing. I'll screen share so everybody can see where their number was, or I can find it for you if you weren't able to see it. All right. So I'm going to pull up the website again that I had screen shared with you just a few minutes ago. And then I'm going to pull up the lottery numbers. All right, so I'm screen sharing again. And this is going to be the drawing for the first drawing, the local preference drawing for the Devon at Weiss Farm in Stoneham. And what I'm going to do is, this is my Excel sheet here. This has all of the 41 lottery application numbers that are local preference households. So if you were a local preference household, you live, work, have a child going to Stoneham Public Schools, and you indicated that on your application, you're one of the 41 households here. And I'm going to copy those numbers, and I'm going to now put them into the list randomizer that I was just in a moment ago for the demonstration. And I'm going to run the local preference drawing for Weiss Farm at Devon. Weiss Farm was the old name, but the Devon at Weiss Farm. So I'm going to click randomize. There were 42 items. As you can see here, for the local preference drawing, number 19 came in first, or was drawn first. I'm going to come back to that so you'll be able to see the results. But for now, I'm just going to kind of put it over here so it's a little easier to see when we revisit it in just a minute. I'm going to save those results. This was the local preference drawing. I'm going to go back now and do the general drawing, which includes all 221 application numbers. So I'm going to go back into the list randomizer. I'm going to go back to here, and this is the 221 every application number for the Devon at Weiss Farm. And I'm going to take all of these and do the same thing. Quick and easy drawing rather than pulling out a bunch of numbers. I'm going to click randomize again, and this is the drawing for the Devon at Weiss Farm, the general drawing, and I'm going to use both of these list of results to generate the waiting lists after this meeting. So I'm just going to, like I said, make it a little easier to see here before scrolling through and letting everyone take a look at the results. All right, so to go back to the local drawing, this will just take a second. I'm going to make it as big as I can. If you want to take a look, these are the results for the local drawing. If you had local preference, your number should be here. It just goes down to 41. And now I'm going to click over to the general drawing, make it a little bigger. And this is the general drawing. So everyone's application number is going to be here. I'm going to scroll down, but I know that there's just a lot of numbers on your screen right now. Some people might not even have the have a screen up. So if you don't see your number and you want to know what position your lottery application number was drawn in, you can type that into the chat. Or if you don't have access to that because you're on your phone or something like that, you can unmute yourself and let me know, and I'll look up your number for you to let you know where you are. Again, these are not the waiting list though, so you're not going to know kind of, if I tell you that you're number 50 on the waiting list, that doesn't mean that you will be number 50 on if you're number 50 on these drawing results, it doesn't mean you're going to be number 50 on the waiting list. So you might have a more favorable position, you might have a less favorable position depending on your household type, whether or not you have local preference for some of the waiting lists, and so that kind of remains to be seen. All right, I'm gonna scroll down a little faster. You can still have a look there and see if you see your number.
I don't think I could see my number. I'm 157.
Sure.
I'm actually A0157.
Yep, I'll find that for you in just a second. So we're at the bottom now. A.0157. You were drawn 204th in the local drawing and 36th, sorry, you were 36th in the local drawing, and in the general drawing, you were 204th.
Okay. So what does that mean?
It doesn't mean much right now when I do the,
Later on. Okay.
Yeah, so you have a general idea where you were drawn, but it doesn't mean a whole lot because you don't know who was drawn ahead of you, what household type they are, what unit size they applied for. So, the lottery is just kind of one of those steps that we need to take, but the waiting list are what's going to tell you whether or not you're going to have a better chance to move forward in the process. All right, so I'm going to go to the chat now, because I know there's a few people who have sent the number over. Okay, so 0127 was first. You were drawn 193rd on the general list. And on the local list, you're 21st. Local drawing, I should say. Next one here is A.003. 0033. You were drawn 16th in the general, not on the local list. Oh, you asked what does that mean? So like I said, it doesn't mean a whole lot now because these are just the lottery results that need to be sorted onto the waiting list. So you don't know who ahead of you applied for what unit. You don't know what their priority is on the waiting list. You just kind of have to wait a little longer until I sort the results onto the waiting list, and you'll know at that point what your chances are of moving forward right away to the next step in the process. The next person here is 0191. You were drawn 151st in the general drawing, and you're not on the local list, so you didn't have local preference. A.0228, not on the local list, but in the general drawing, you were drawn 155th. 0121, you were drawn 198th on the general list. On the local list, 0121, you were 37th. 0139, you're not on the local list, but on the general list, you were drawn 148th. That's 0139. Was anyone else not able to see their number? Like I said, this doesn't tell you a whole lot right now because the waiting lists haven't been generated yet, but we did do the drawing, so the lottery drawings for both of the, for all of the apartments.
I'm on the local, I applied for local list. My number is A0140 because we were working with a hospital in Winchester, and also I'll be doing some work with the city with the farmers market.
0140, I don't have you on the local list. So when you applied for the lottery, you may not have indicated that you were a resident of Stoneham or working full-time there. Because I only had you on the general list here. You weren't as a local preference household.
Okay.
So you're 107 in the general.
Okay.
What about 145?
145. You were 194th in the general drawing, not on the local list. Someone asked how many local apartments are given, so I'll show that in just a second. I'll pull up the waiting list so you guys can see them. I see that 0158 was asking. That is 145th. You were drawn 145th in the general drawing. And then 208, you were 182nd in the general drawing, not on the local list. . Yep, so the question here, one more question. I have applied for St. Patrick's Scholarship. I'm number 0. I think you were just asking, right? Yeah, so your lottery, oh no, sorry. This is a different person. So you were 60 in the general drawing.
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, two questions particularly. I didn't see my number. It was a dot 0220.
0220. You were 83rd in the general drawing, and then you weren't on the local list. So
So
83rd.
what does the general drawing really mean? I'm sorry. I had my AirPod and it was kind of.
Oh, so general just means that you didn't apply for local preference. You didn't indicate on your lottery application that you work full-time or live full-time in Stoneham. So actually, there was another question on that too. So I'm going to pull up the information packet so you guys can see it. So the local preference means that for some waiting lists, I'm going to make this a little smaller. For some waiting lists, households with local preference have priority. For these units, households with local preference have a higher priority when I am sorting the results of this lottery onto the waiting list. So if you're applied for a studio apartment and you have local preference for 4 of the units, you're going to have priority on the waiting list over non-local households. Even if you don't have local preference, you're going to have a position on all of the local preference lists. You're just going to be behind all of the households who have local preference. We don't know how many people, when we start the lottery, are going to have local preference. In this case, we know that there was 41 people that indicated they have local preference. And then there's also open waiting lists which don't have local preference. So there's no priority for if you're a Stoneham resident for these apartments. So there's an additional 3 studio apartments that you could be a Stoneham resident or not, and you would still have the same priority as people who don't have local preference. So
Okay, and another question.
Yep.
How would you know would we know right now during this lottery if we were picked or no?
So everyone has a position on the waiting list, meaning that all of the numbers were just drawn, and everybody who has a lottery application number is going to be on the waiting list. You don't know where you're going to be on the waiting list, so everyone is picked essentially, but it doesn't mean that everyone on the waiting list is going to move on to the next step in the process, because it's likely that the apartments will be leased before we extinguish the waiting list or move everyone forward. But
Question.
Sure.
So technically I would have been working in Stoneham in March, but there's some technicalities, so it's been kind of delayed. And so how do you know, like I would definitely will be working in a hospital in Stoneham, 100%. I'm moving there hopefully over the summer if I get in. Hopefully I get into Weiss form. I tried on over Stoneham, but hopefully I'm hoping to get in a Weiss form so I can have a home. So does that change anything for me?
So if you have like a letter of employment showing that you're going to be working full time in Stoneham, you can submit that if you're one of the top applicants on the waiting list, and we can transition you over to local preference. But as of right now, you don't have local preference in the lottery.
So I have to go back to the website and upload the.
Nope. So the application period is closed. I just mean if you are one of the top households on the waiting list and you're asked to provide all of your information, you can let us know at that point if you have a job offer in Stoneham for a full-time position. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, just one last question. I really don't mean to be full of questions, but do you have to require like be in good credit standards in order to do the lottery process, or
So the leasing office is going to likely check your credit. SEB Housing doesn't do credit checks, but the leasing office, which is the next step in the process, right, to have a lease screening, they're going to do probably reference checks, landlord checks, background checks, credit checks, whatever you might expect a landlord to check on is likely what the leasing office is going to do for the lease screening. So I don't know the criteria in terms of what they consider a passing credit score, though.
So basically, you're just saying they can go by their own, stipulations. So if they require you to have a certain credit,
right,
that's the requirement.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be different for every management company, probably.
Okay.
I can just add to that question. I was in a lottery for Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and I got selected for the application process. And I have a Section 8 certificate and a 640 credit score, and I got denied for credit standard. They don't have to tell you what the score is. They just have to tell you if you're approved or denied.
Yeah, the process is likely going to be different for each management company, but yeah, the requirement of the program is that their lease screening can't be more stringent for affordable applicants as it can be for market applicants. So they shouldn't be screening anyone, with more strict criteria if you're looking to rent an affordable apartment. But they all kind of had their own criteria.
Okay, and just to be clear, so we're going to be getting the results of the lottery for the general. For me, I know it's general because I'm not local. So we'll be getting those results later on, or will we be able to see them like in email later on tonight?
Yep. So my plan is to sort the results of the lottery drawings that we just had onto the waiting list tonight, and you should get an email from me later on tonight. Or it'll actually come from info@sdbhousing.com or no reply at sdbhousing.com, and that will have the waiting list attached to it. You'll be able to see where you fall on the waiting list. If your number is highlighted in green, that means that you're going to immediately be asked to move on to the next step in the process, which is to get in touch with the leasing office and complete their screening. And then a question here too is, so the higher number probably means I won't get one. So when you see what your result is on the waiting list, if you're the last person on the waiting list, for example, it may be possible, it'll be likely that you won't be moving forward in the process unless everyone ahead of you on the waiting list drops off or doesn't rent the unit, or there's still units left once everybody has been screened. But if you were not highlighted, if your lottery application number is not highlighted in green tonight, it doesn't mean that you won't be asked to move forward in the process later on. Because like I said, there will be people that are dropping off the waiting list who just aren't interested anymore. They were denied by the leasing office, whatever it might be. So you don't have to look at the results tonight and know that, if you're not highlighted in green, you still could move forward in the process. You just won't be moving forward right away.
So the highlighting in green doesn't really specify to anything like the list that you just showed us now. Because when you showed me my number, it was in green, but everybody was in green.
There's no one's highlighted in green right now. It's the waiting list that are going to be sent over are going to have that. Yeah, you're gonna see that when you get the email.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
No. There's another question here too. Will we know what the rental costs are if we make the waiting list? So everyone's on the waiting list, but the rents are listed. They were listed on the application. They're listed on your screen right now in the information packet. So these are the rents. They don't change unless you have a Section 8 voucher or an MRBP voucher or something like that you plan to use. Your rent share will be calculated by the housing agency that you have your voucher through. If you don't have a voucher, you're going to be paying the rent amounts that are listed here. Yep. And the question is, those are considered affordable. They are considered affordable, quote unquote, by the program because the formula is based off of applicants paying no more than 30% of their rent towards towards rent, toward 30% of your monthly household income towards rent. And then a question here to everyone is, if you don't move forward, will they keep your name on file for the future? Yep, so the waiting list will be kept by the leasing office. And if you don't end up leasing one of these units initially, they're going to reach out to you annually to confirm whether or not you want to remain on their waiting list. So once they lease up all 65 units, they kind of just put the waiting list aside until they have a vacancy. And so the first affordable application or first affordable applicant that a resident that moves out, there's now a vacancy. So maybe they have a 2-bedroom available next year. They're going to be looking at the 2-bedroom waiting list to fill that vacancy. So like I said, each year they'll be reaching out to everyone on the waiting list to ask if you're still interested in staying on there. They will have your information. If you, have a change of address or a email address change or anything like that, you're going to want to update that with the leasing office so they can update their file and get in touch with you in the future if you're still interested in renting there. So I'm going to work on sorting the results onto the waiting list. Does anybody have any other questions before I end the call?
Yeah, I just had one question. What do they have for amenities?
For amenities, so I'm going to go back to page 3 here of the application, the information packet, because it kind of gives you a little overview of it. So central air, washer dryer in each unit, clubhouse and fitness center, seasonal swimming pool, pet friendly, work from home spaces, that sort of thing. Another question here. Can you change to a 1-bedroom in the future if my son decides to move out? You can change, but you will lose your position on so say if you're on a 2-bedroom waiting list right now, you wouldn't have that same position on the 1-bedroom waiting list. You would be placed at the end of the 1-bedroom waiting list behind all of the other applicants that were applying for a 1-bedroom at the time of the lottery. So there's a question here, can I take my number off the waiting list since I can't afford those rental amounts? So yeah, if you want to withdraw or if you want to withdraw from the waiting list, just email us. I'm going to put info in here just so you have it, but you want to just let us know by emailing info@sdbhousing.com. And then after tonight, if you have any changes to your application in the future and you want to make sure that the leasing office has your updated information, you're going to want to email the leasing office. The leasing office's information will be sent to you tonight with the waiting list, so you'll have that, so you can get in touch with them if you're moving on to the lease screening. Any other questions? Like I said, you'll get an email from either info@sdbhousing.com tonight or no reply@sdbhousing.com, and that will be the email from me with next steps. Waiting list will be attached to it, and hopefully it'll make a lot more sense when you kind of see where your lottery application number falls on the waiting list and whether or not you'll be moving forward to the next step in the process, which is to apply for a lease with the leasing office. Yep, so how many units are available for this move-in? All 65. So all of the affordable units at this property are included in this lottery. So there's 65 affordable apartments, and the breakdown was mentioned earlier, and it'll also be on your on the attachment that comes to you guys with the waiting list. So look out for that email tonight. And like I said, if there's any questions for us after the fact, or once you get the results and you have any other questions that you didn't think of until then, please feel free to email us at info@sdbhousing.com, and we'll be sure to get right back to you. So you'll hear from us later on tonight. Thank you all for your attendance. Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.